Отже, пані та панове, mental stage продовжує
Ladies
свою
and
роботу. І
gentlemen,
прямо
the
зараз
mental
поруч зі мною
stage
представники
continues its
Ліги
work,
психічного
and I
здоров'я
have the
Словаччини та
representatives of the
Київського офісу
League
Словацької
of
організації
Psychiatric
GLOBSEC.
Associations of
Вони
Slovakia and
підготували
GLOBSEC.
комплексний звіт про
They
травми,
put
пов'язані з
together
війною.
a comprehensive report on
присвячений
war-related
підтримці
traumas,
ветеранів
and
війни.
the report
GLOBSEC
pertains to
провела
PTSD among combat
інтерв'ю з
veterans.
експертами
GLOBSEC
США,
conducted over
Великобританії,
50
Ізраїлю,
interviews
Хорватії,
with
Боснії
experts
та
from the
Герцеговини.
US,
І поспілкувалися
Bosnia,
з
Herzegovina,
спеціалістськими
Israel,
фахівцями.
and also Ukrainian experts as well. I would like to introduce everyone who we have here on stage, and I will also elucidate the format of our work within this block. Martin Polachik, Deputy Director of the Kyiv office of GLOBSEC. Greetings.
Andrei
Vrščanský, the head of the League of Mental Health from Slovakia. Ksenia Voznicina, the Director of Mental Health and Rehabilitation Center Polyana. And Viktor Dosenko, scientist, pathophysiologist, genetist, and head of the Physiology Institute within the Academy of National Sciences of Ukraine. Greetings, colleagues. So we will be exposed to a report from GLOBSEC, and then we will have a discussion of this report. Marte, Andrei, over to you.
Thank you very much. GLOBSEC was the first international organization that opened its office in Kyiv since the start of the full-scale war. We've opened the office here on 16th of October in 22, and since then we are basically preparing Ukraine for what's going to be after the war. It doesn't mean that we're not waiting for the end of the war, but on the main two topics that we have worked so far, which is demining and PTSD or trauma which is induced by the war, we are trying to prepare Ukraine for what's to come. Our first report on war-related trauma, which we hope we already know is first of many. We did more than 50 interviews with people in Ukraine and outside of Ukraine. We have 13 experts from 6 countries: USA, United Kingdom, Israel, Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Ukraine. And we basically tried to paint the picture of what the situation in Ukraine is right now, so the status quo, and we have some recommendation what can be done to actually solve many of the issues that the report is about. So in case that people are interested in a printed copy, it's fresh, printed yesterday, I can give you one. So what are the main findings that we came up with? First thing we need to really know is that if Ukraine is becoming a member of the European Union in 5 to 10 years, which we know it will, maybe sooner, then the highly qualified and hard-working labor force is a great asset. We already see that now, because many of the people that left Ukraine because of the war are already big advantage of the labor market in Europe, mostly women, but we can assume that many of the people who are right now at the front line will join their families outside of Ukraine later and will join the labor market, so we need to get ready for that. Ukraine is hitting scores of being the nation with the biggest number of people who have lost their limbs. There are, of course, projects like Unbroken in Lviv and other who are dealing with the situation, but the entire population is also being exposed to different war-related psychological traumas. And this is not only people who are on the front line, but also people who are targeted by the rockets, who have sleep deprivation. We think we can talk about huge, multi-layered national or overall populational trauma, which is happening right here. The Ministry of Health is predicting that 15 million people will require different kinds of psychological support, and 3 to 4 million people will need to receive drugs to manage mental health problems resulting from the war. And it might be more, and on lower levels, actually, every single person in Ukraine will need some sort of support. So we think that EU should consider supporting proper diagnosis, treatment and rehabilitation of war-related psychological traumas, as this is one of the best investments in its future human capital. We need to realize that also in other countries, like Great Britain, other European countries, investment into mental health is recognized as one of the best investments that a government can make. And we are not talking about people who are actually in war. So if we take the findings from other countries, which maybe Andrei can talk about more, we will see that it's actually ensuring mental preparedness to deal with future in Ukrainian population can be one of the best things that actually the world community can do to help Ukraine to thrive. People on the front line are, of course, the most challenging category. 1.8 to 2 million of veterans is the number we are assuming right now, but that is if the war stops tomorrow. So the longer the war will prevail, the more veterans there will be, and the more we need to be prepared for dealing with their complex PTSD, which is combined with multiple brain injuries from kinetic blasts that will make treatment even more difficult. So there are two things that are special for Ukrainian situation. The first one, most of the soldiers are not professional soldiers. You know, they were programmers and accountants and people who teachers, or like Oleg Sentsov, you know, filmmakers, and they are on the front like right now. Oleg has gone through 3 concussions already, and he's still on the front line. So people like him will need serious support once the war is over or once they leave the front line as they are right now. Interaction with psychologically fragile family members returning from the combat zone can also trigger PTSD in family members and other relatives if they're not well prepared to deal with the situation that will happen after these people come from the front line. Real numbers of complex PTSD in Ukraine could be much higher than the expected 20%. Well, where does the 20% come from? If we look at Israel, before they started their PTSD program, United Kingdom, United States, but also at Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, it's always somewhere between 15 and 25%. So roughly 20% is what is expected in Ukraine as well. We think it's going to be much more because of the specifics that I was just talking about that only can apply to Ukraine. So Ukraine needs to develop an efficient approach and system for management of complex PTSD because it will become a real issue for the whole population in the country. There is a lack of international consensus regarding the trajectory of PTSD, diversity of approaches in the diagnosis and treatment, and inconsistencies in defining response to PTSD treatments. This is a problem because even when you start talking with people from United States, United Kingdom, Israel, they're not even using the same language, describing the same type of behavior or problems. So if we want to, you know, take the best expertise from other countries, first we need to stabilize the language that we want to talk with, that we want to use to talk about the problem, because some books do not mention complex PTSD at all. Some people mention complex PTSD as the main problem that they need to deal with. And they might be talking about the same thing, but they are using different language. So stabilizing the language, having good translation of foreign materials is one of the first things that definitely needs to be done in Ukraine as well. Then there's consensus among many professionals that various treatments for PTSD have so far shown limited success. We are mostly talking about psychological and psychotherapeutical help, which is somewhere at 1/3 of clients that can successfully be helped with their problems. So an approach that is looking at PTSD through the lens of neurobiology, we think is worth considering, that it is a holistic approach that is not only about mental health, that is also about, you know, hormonal system, everything inside. So we are looking at the person as a whole, not only at his mental or her mental problems. we've seen that financial support of international partners has been huge so far. Basically, half of the Ukrainian budget is coming from abroad right now. But we don't see that much support for mental well-being and war trauma treatment, and we think this should change. And exactly, conferences and summits and panels like this are the best platform to actually call for help, because with the funding that this country needs, a lot of the programs that we just talk about now or that are just starting can receive support that can then help many people in the terrain. It seems reasonable to consider possibilities of using more financial instruments of the EU and NATO, and I think exactly, platforms like this should be the ones that will call for this help. Not only asking for money, but actually, talking about concrete steps and projects like your projects that will say, look, we are already starting. If you can financially support us, we can do much more. Ukrainian authorities are already working on post-war complex reconstruction, and we are not only talking about mental health or complex, dealing with the trauma, but also, physical reconstruction, demining, stuff like that. Nationwide campaign under the patronage of the First Lady of Ukraine, Madam Olena Zelenska, who's the organizer of this event, really helps to raise awareness to issues of war-related psychological traumas in Ukraine. We were just talking with Andrei this morning that it's a sci-fi to actually see high-profile event like this talking about mental health. You don't see things like this in many other countries. So I think this is something that already Ukraine is showing the way. But we need to, step up the speed in order to really help people out there. So all governmental policies on the issue of war-related traumas are still lacking proper coordinations. There are too many bodies, too many organizations, too many ministries dealing with separate issues that need to combine together, that need to work together. So I think one of the main things that you can take out of our report is that a lot of stuff is being done right now, but we need to connect them all under one platform, under one roof, to actually be more effective than we are right now. Another thing is that Ukraine lacks well-trained professionals. Some people estimate that there needs to be doubling of the figures of specialists available from current, the numbers you see. We need to go at least double, maybe more. And Andrei will talk about how we can actually establish growing of this number soon after me. One problem that we've realized that is happening in Ukraine is that with all this, we want to solve stuff, there comes some trouble. When we wrote our first report on demining, we saw these guys, who built tractors for demining, that they would try to demine their fields. Ukraine has this, MacGyver approach that we can build anything, we can solve anything, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. On the level of demining, it sometimes creates, these success stories, sometimes it creates injuries and deaths. On the level of mental health and war-related trauma issues, becoming a psychologist or a therapist in 3 weeks is not the way. So we need to actually tackle the problem of these, fast schools of helpers, because sometimes they can do much more damage than they can actually help. And League for Mental Health from Slovakia is starting its work in Ukraine right now. So I'm finishing with one thing. For a policy recommendation, please seal the full version of report. You can take it or find it on the GLOBSEC webpage, or we can send you a link. And to answer the question how to have more professionals in the field of trauma, I give the floor to Andrei.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I have to bring in a different perspective now into the whole problem of mental health, because basically we have, we understand there's a huge problem everywhere in the world, not even in the territories which are affected by war. The demand for services is brutal compared to the number of professionals available. Is the problem everywhere in the world. Now the problem within Ukraine and also in Slovakia is even larger than that. So we have three great problems at the same time. So we have lack of professionals. I heard Professor Fonagy from Anna Freud Center for Children and Families from London. We cooperated with him sometimes. He said that if they doubled the numbers of mental health professionals in the United Kingdom, they would not be able to cover the demand. Even in the UK, where their percentage of GDP for mental health is much larger than, of course, than in our countries. So there's this lack of professionals. There's this risk of low quality. That's what you started to talk about, because people without proper education provide advice which they are not basically educated to do. And the third problem at the same time is enormous need. Now, what do we do if we have these kinds of problems? Now, I don't know if you're acquainted, people who work in the mental health business are acquainted with the mental health psychosocial support pyramid. It's an established system. You're not?
2 plus 2 4.
Okay. What do you mean? Yeah, of course. Of course. So basically, the pyramid is about there's 4 types of services which create a perfect, a good system for mental health. Now, at the very top of the iceberg are the specialized services, which means basically in the mental health, it's psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, etc. Then there's a layer of non-specialized support, as general practitioners, social workers, etc. Then you have community and family support, and this general support, including awareness activities, etc. Now, it's a huge triangle, or let's say it's a pyramid. Now, if we talk about capacities, based on the studies that are available freely everywhere, the specialized services are basically required in a non-emergency situations by 2% of people who require some kind of support in mental health, and emergency situations, it's roughly about 6%. Okay, let's just talk about rough numbers. Let's say it's even 10%. It's basically never more. So what I want to talk about a bit is about the paradigm of how do we think about resolving the problem, okay? So imagine that we should fill in the entire pyramid with what we call professionals when we talk about mental health usually. When we talk about mental health, we're usually talking about this idea that there's some super educated professional who will do something with my mental health problem, so that the result of this process is that the problem disappears. That's the usual understanding based on the biomedical approach, based on our approaches and attitudes built on a lot of stigma, etc. But if you think about it, we're not talking about doubling the numbers. Like there's no country in the world is able to produce this number of mental health professionals. Now, what do? So that's probably not the right way to solve the problem, right? So and this brings me to a very eye-opening information, and I was very surprised when we started the project a couple of years ago in Slovakia. The result of this idea is that the quality of a good modern mental health care system does not only depend on the number of professionals, not at all. In fact, it depends on the number of paraprofessionals and non-professionals, of the way in which communities have tools to provide meaningful mental health support to each other. Now, there are some risks attached to this. Where do we find these people? If there's not enough capacities for the professionals, and I'm not saying that that we don't need to double the numbers. Of course we do, and maybe we need to triple the numbers. That's for sure. I'm not against it at all, but that will never be enough. So where do we find additional capacities? Well, it's been researched a lot of times. There's the guidelines from interagency standing committee for mental health, psychosocial support. There's the recovery approaches. There's a lot of countries who really dig into this problem. And the answer is actually very simple. There's people with lived experience with mental health challenges on various scales, right? These people are very valuable because they have some kind of experience. And there is a way how, in a psychosocial model, they can be used to participate in meaningful services for other people who have similar types of problems. And this is a huge thing, because if you think about the pyramid again, there's this non-specialized services, you need education for that, but for the two bottom layers of the pyramid, there's this loads of people. In Slovakia has 5 million citizens. Roughly the numbers that you also presented in the panel is 1 in 10, 1 in 5, 1 in 50. There's a lot of people. If we talk about that there's not enough people to do the job, it's not entirely true, because there's a lot of people with lived experience who actually need to share their stories, who actually need to help other people. And there are reasonable ways how to use this motivated, engaged people who have some kind of experience. Now, of course, there's this, how can this work, if you think about it? Because if there's a real professional, a psychiatrist, why do I trust that he, she resolves my problem? Well, he, she has a lot of education, a lot of training, a lot of theoretical background, a lot of experience. Now, if I meet somebody who has depression like I have, then I immediately trust this person that he knows what the hell I'm talking about, right? So there's this instant trust. We hired 200 Ukrainian mental health professionals in various degrees of education, and to help other members of the Ukrainian community after the war. And the trust of shared experience just works fabulously. The other thing that is quite magical about this, about using people with lived experience, is actually that we are transforming a barrier. If somebody has depression, they don't want to talk about it, maybe they lose their jobs, maybe they have a lot of problems, their family, they are not able to work, etc., etc. Now we are transforming the barrier that they have been facing for their whole life into an advantage. So what we did in Slovakia, for instance, is, it's not, we did not invent the wheel, of course. It's been measured a long time ago. We said, you can only work with us if you have this experience with mental ill health. And so transforming life experience for these people, because, of course, they have a lot to say. And of course, it's a human rights approach, if you talk to WHO, etc., etc. But the most important thing is that of course, people with lived experience are able to have jobs, to participate into economy in a meaningful way. Now, there is one problem, that do not harm principle is very important, because we do not want to provide services that do harm to others, of course. Now, how do we make sure they don't harm? Well, there's plenty of evidence what kind of activities are good, what kind of activities are bad, but that's not enough. Because with people, with a system using or utilizing the skills and experience of people with lived experience, there is another principle: do not advise. If I don't have the education, I cannot provide advice. Now, the question is, if I do not provide advice, what am I doing? Is there a value added? Of course, there is. There's huge value added, because all the bottom layers of the pyramid are basically about creating a safe environment in which people are equal to each other, even the service providers are equal to the service users, and in this equality they are able to actually choose, so they are empowered to talk about their problems, they are empowered to actually share their experience and listen to each other's experience, and it's a very different thing from professional interventions. So now the problem with quality begins where people without proper education provide advice. If they don't provide advice, but are trained in a smart way to create the safe environment on the principles of equal treatment, it just works perfectly. And there's the whole concepts of recovery colleges, discovery colleges, peer workers who are not substituting doctors or nurses or social workers, not at all. They are providing a different kind of service, which is very needed, and the capacities for these kinds of services are basically very easily accessible. So that's our story. Just to give you a very short information, and I'm already finished. So in Slovakia, there's roughly 100,000 our friends from Ukraine. Right now, we provided some psychosocial services to about 30,000 of those. More than 150,000 consultations, more than 200 Ukrainians and 100 Slovaks are working on this. So basically, it is doable and it works. So I believe that in our country, that's basic. If we talk about the future of mental health care, if we do not talk about this psychosocial model in a meaningful way, we will make no difference in the end. Because in our country, if there's 50 more psychiatrists or not, I mean, I would be happy if they were, but that would not change much, right? Using these capacities would. So yes, we are opening a branch. So hopefully we'll be able to actually relocate some of the people that we trained Ukrainians in Slovakia back to Ukraine to share their what they learned. Thank you very much.
Дякуємо. Дякуємо нашим колегам.
Thank you, our colleagues, our guests,
Детальний розловий
for this detailed and rigorous explanation. So, Ksenia and Victor, now I'm turning to you. We'd like to hear your reviews
Що здивувало,
of everything that you have heard. What has amazed you? What you agree or disagree with? You're welcome.
Guys, thank you very much for sharing. But I should say a lot. I will continue Ukrainians because I'm a little bit nervous. Розумієте, на сьогодні
Nowadays, Ukraine
не 1,5 року в війні,
has been for more than a half years at war, but this is even more than that. Since 2014, this is nearly 10 years. A huge amount of work has been done. A lot of first-hand experience has been gained. We have been learning so much from the international community, from Europe, the United States, and Israel. But the Ukrainian context, the context of the Ukrainian war and the current situation, unfortunately also presents its own circumstances. And you know, when I look at my colleagues and peers, I'm looking at them and I'm seeing each of their eyes and faces. It's sometimes a little bit embarrassing when you're asking us whether we know about this pyramid of HPSS. We know about it. For a long time we have known it, and we have been guided by this pyramid and this knowledge in every step of our way. And recently, you know, some professionalists in 2019, they learned from Sir Tony Croft from the UK team. And some 5 years, perhaps, we have been trying to establish and implement the knowledge about this pyramid here in Ukraine. Naturally, part of the people will require the services of the high specialists, highly qualified specialists at the top of the pyramid. But you're right. The rest of the pyramid is not about psychiatrists, shrinks, links. Not all of these people, CMDR, who always go about high-level narratives. This is about the community, about peer-to-peer. This is the purpose that we pursue within our community of specialists. Secondly, concerning the number of people employed in this sector, according to you, about 1,000 people are psychologists in Ukraine. Let me tell you that the National Psychological Association of Ukraine already comprises 1,500 psychologists. The Association of Psychotherapeutists in Ukraine is about 2,500 specialists. The CBD Therapy Association is about hundreds and hundreds of other specialists, let alone other specialties. So we have a great number of highly qualitatively trained specialists. In terms of all-out war, of course, they will never be enough. It's logical. It stands to logic. Any country in the world would never have enough of such specialists. However, the intensity of the training that they are undergoing over the recent years is just amazing.
Я представляю заклад,
And I'm a representative of the institution that represents the top of this pyramid. However, my task and all of my colleagues and peers here is to think about the bottom layers, about psychosocial support, because this is the foundational layer of our work, and a lot has already been done in this respect. A great number of NGOs, CSOs that are engaged working in the primary healthcare, MHGAP program, teaching family doctors and being able to manage psychological disorders within the framework of family care. Moreover, the WHO has included in their MHGAP a course on concussion, on MTBI for family doctors. And we as professionals who specialize in this area, for a great number of family doctors on the platform of our National Academy of Health, have already recorded a huge course on this. I'm a neurologist. And MTBI, brain injury, is something that I do specialize in, and this is the core for our professional community to discuss. We know that every soldier in the war has already been affected multiple times with this particular injury, and this is the priority for Ukraine to study MTBI. You know, I want to say so much, and I'm eager to say it. According to your presentation, you know, with reference to every slide, there was so much that I wanted to share with you. Just strikes me that you haven't been able to learn enough about Ukraine, and you interviewed the people, the specialists from other countries, and you conversed very little with the Ukrainians working here for 9 years. This is my strong conviction.
Величезна кількість роботи, про яку ви говорили, вони є на сьогодні для нас очевидними речами для фахівців, які
all these things are pretty obvious to us as professionals, because I mean we've been working relentlessly with combat veterans all this time. Peer-to-peer work is of the utmost importance. We already have a panoply of NGOs and CSOs that are arranging supported living houses. Or, for example, we have communities for people with bipolar disorders or depressive disorders. We even have an institution of mental health ambassadors. This is something that is being implemented within the mental health for Ukraine. This is the Ukraine-Switzerland project that has been implemented in Ukraine for 4 years in a row. So my point here is that the European community views Ukrainian experience as inferior, but believe me, it's colossal. Just trust me there. Very often we have a shortage of resources to share this experience or to spread the word about this experience. In your conclusion that there is a need for financial support, among other things, I agree, but not to train us, but basically we need that support to spread this experience globally. In fact, I can talk about it for hours and hours until the very morning. I wanted to make some comments on each of your slides, but some of the things have already slipped my mind. I'm very sorry. I'm a little bit worried. Maybe you can also respond to some of my comments.
Absolutely. So I'm deeply sorry for asking you about the MHPSS pyramid, because I had no idea that you would be in this panel. So I didn't know what's your background, in fact, because nobody told me. But never mind. I am sorry. Of course, and I have to tell you.
But it's not only about me. It's not only about me. We have a large number of professionals who are up to speed.
I know. And in fact, I have to say that Ukraine is much further down the road than Slovakia is in the reform of mental health, in multidisciplinary teams, in the whole logic of in the strategic papers, etc., etc. So that is absolutely true. So what happened here on my part was that I didn't check who the audience was. So if I was talking to people who had no idea, then of course that would be explanatory, which did not happen. So sorry for that. It was not meant to be arrogant at all. No way. To the contrary. I do appreciate, I understand. We talk with UNICEF, WHO, etc., etc. So we know the amount of work that is being done. So if that was disrespectful, that's the explanation.
Знаєте, ще вам цікаву річ розкажу. Навіть
There's another interesting thing that I would like to share with you. I had a peek at your book, not just the presentation, but also the printed out version. And you recommend utilizing a holistic biopsychosocial approach to PTSD treatment, including eclectic treatment, eclectic medicine. This is something that is not only used in Ukraine, but we already have a well-developed model of such aid, such assistance. We even have a mental health center. And to treat PTSD or depression, we utilize physical therapy, ergotherapy, acupuncture, neurofeedback, a lot of complementary methods, oriental practices, art rehabilitation. We use social workers. We have a model of case management that is incorporated into this work. So this model has already been described by us, and we already have agreement on implementing it in Lviv, the southern regions, Odessa, and we will have 5 to 7 other satellites. So this is just the top of the pyramid, as you understand, but this is something that is much needed as well. So we should not really have too many of these centers, but they must be holistic and they must be grounded and steeped in the best international principles. And this is something that we are implementing. This is something that we are translating into reality. You might be surprised at the amount of work and the number of initiatives implemented by Ukraine and Ukrainian community in this regard. Well, Victor, over to you, because we have very little time left, and we would like to hear you. 45 seconds, this is the only time that I have. Well, a little bit more than that. This is discrimination. This is discriminatory. Well, first and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude to our colleagues from Slovakia. It's a beautiful analysis, and we gleaned some important insights from this review. Thank you very much for that. It goes without saying that some of the facts are not really objective. How did you determine that we don't really have appropriate training for our professionals? Did you test them? Did you check their knowledge? So what are some of the criteria that you utilize to determine that they have a low level of training? Maybe it's like the highest level of training globally or the lowest level of training globally. I'm well versed in our education system, and I lean more towards a low level of training, most likely. I cannot really talk about it for a fact, but this year, all medical institutions and all medical universities turned out people who did not really attend a single class offline. It all started with the COVID-19 pandemic, and then the full-scale war broke out. So they trained in a very episodical manner. How can you train a doctor or like a student who did not really see patients, who did not really see teachers firsthand for 3 years? How can you train a psychiatrist, a competent psychiatrist in a remote manner? What about training psychologists remotely? I have some doubts about that. So this is a serious challenge indeed. And these are some of the issues that we are observing in the higher education system pertaining to psychology and psychiatry. So we do have medical education, and our students pass something similar to step 1, step 2, 3 tests. This is a system adapted to the Ukrainian setting, and it demonstrates that they have been well trained, that they have acquired some practical skills, but they haven't really visited a single class offline for 3 years. And then next year, we will turn out students who will not have been to physical classes for 4 years. So this is a enormous problem indeed. I'm not really sure how to attend to it, what to do about it. There's a need for some interventions. To the best of my understanding, the purpose of your presentation is to enlist more support for Ukraine, for example, from the WHO, from the European Commission, even NATO, support for mental health. We will never say no to this support and assistance, which is beautiful and amazing, but there are two options there. So either you give a fish or fishing line. We want to get the fish because basically we can even make money ourselves, especially if we unravel robust research in the area of mental health. This is something that would be of interest to scientific institutions, Horizon, and clinical studies. This is something that is relevant as well. In Europe, there are 72 ongoing studies. They are at the stage of recruiting patients, and they pertain to different treatments for PTSD. And unfortunately, we don't really have a single study of this sort in Ukraine. Why? This is something that needs to be changed. There's another thing that I would like to add to your presentation. You circumvented this problem. Do you know what the number of people with PTSD is in Slovakia? Most likely you do. But you will never know how many patients like this we have in Ukraine because we don't have registers. We don't really do our math in this regard. So it's a problem, right? We need to make the count. We need to know how many people like this we have with the relevant diagnostic criteria. Only then will it be clear how many patients we have and what kind of material or financial support they require or what kind of psychological support they require. So this is my request to you because we don't possess these data. As for scientific research, this is something that we initiate together with Ksenia. The Polyana Center is a robust, well-reputed center. It's a scientific center. We've had 2 conferences in the center. The CSD Lab company director is supporting us because we want to identify biomarkers because basically we want to be able to identify the signs of this diagnosis without conversing with professionals because you will always have a deficit of professionals. So you have a drop of blood, and this is something that can help us MTBI or PTSD or any other mental health issues related to the war. And then around that, you can develop and bolster international cooperation. We've been supported by the Utah University. They are offering a solution in the form of storyline health. It's the most powerful artificial intelligence system to assess the condition of health of a patient based on their review and analysis of their face, micromimics, the condition of their eyes, and whatnot. And this is something that can be successfully implemented, but it requires grants from international funds and foundations. We might tap into this funding together with some Slovakian organizations and stakeholders, and then we will be better positioned to achieve success. And the last point that I would like to make is that the treatment of any disorder starts with screening. If there is no screening, then you cannot really identify a disorder. Biomarkers are great. We already have biomarkers for stress, but we don't really have any biomarkers for PTSD screening. This is someone that everyone has an avid interest in, but there are 5 issues. And by the way, I have my research fellow, neuropsychologist, Serhiy Danilov, present here. So this T-shirt is a great solution to this issue. This is a piece of work by a Ukrainian graphic designer. And basically, this is our confident scientific perspective on this issue. This is not a T letter. It's a look, calm, confident, composed. This is our look or perspective on the war-related trauma. And there are also 5 simple questions that each and every Ukrainian has to answer from time to time. It doesn't really matter where they are, in Slovakia, where you are lending a helping hand to our people, maybe here in Ukraine. So you have this model, you have these questions, and then there has to be a professional that will either corroborate or refute this conclusion or diagnosis. So thank you very much for your support, because we've gleaned some useful insights. Thank you, Victor, Martin, but very briefly.
Yes, 5 of the experts we have in our group are Ukrainians, so we are trying to get as much information, but we are already offering, collaborations to you, to anyone, so we can get more information, more specific information. And I will end up with a personal note. There's a good reason why I am not running in the elections in Slovakia right now, although I was in the parliament for 10 years. I'm leaving my family in Bratislava every month to come to Kyiv since January. I'm here through the nights when the bombing is here. I'm in the shelters with Ukrainians, and the only reason is that I truly believe in this country. I know that in many ways you are better than anyone thinks. I'm not doubting this. We are not here to teach. We are here to help. The reason why GLOBSEC came to Kyiv was to listen, to assess the needs, to help with finding solutions, and to start the process. So if you know the ways that are better, that are in here in the report, I just told you this is first of many. So the next one we can do together.
Отак от. Клас. Величезне всім спасибі.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. We are done with this component of our summit, but as you understand, we still have a wide array of other events within the summit. Thank you very much.